Yeah, we're doing the Beatles Get Back episode right now.
We got our axes.
Paul McCartney's like, you know, in a song, I use the word axe. He's got his axe on the wall, and he's like, I feel real bad about that lyric because I've never called it an axe in my life.
Losing it when he was talking about his uncle's favorite song when he was sitting around. He was like,
it was probably like Lonnie Donegan or something.
Yeah,
you know, they're like,
but Paul McCartney's voices are incredible. He should be a voice actor.
In like episode 3, he does a song that I've never heard before. That it sounds like he's just doing like a Lonnie Donegan impersonation, but it's like a Paul McCartney original called like Grease Paint. And he goes, put your grease paint on. He's like putting on this like weird like Lonnie Donegan. But it's like, put your grease paint on and dance and sing. That's what show business is all about. He's doing this like weird voice.
The Total Recall Grease Paint players.
And you see like the other Beatles like rolling their eyes like this is not like I've never heard it ever. So it like I don't think it ever even like showed up on like a Paul McCartney solo album or anything. So yeah, this song Every Little Thing, it's like it's a Beatles song I don't really think about much, but like in Get Back, George Harrison was like talking because they're talking about playing some oldies but goodies, because they're like at the end of their tenure as Beatles. Like maybe they don't know it at the time that the end is near, but like they're kind of looking back at their history, and so they're talking about like, oh, maybe when we do this live show we'll throw in some oldies but goodies, you know, from our repertoire. And George Harrison's like, you know what one I always liked that we one I always liked but we don't do anymore was Every Little Thing. And then he starts playing it, and it's like, yeah, that is like, it's kind of cool that out of all like the sort of like Lennon McCartney songs, that one stuck out to George, like, hey, that's a cool one. And it was like, yeah, that one is pretty cool. And I don't, you don't really think about it too much. So
I'm glad we to jam it.
Try to. So it's got this intro, which I'm not. It's like. Something like that.
Yeah, it sounds.
Something like that. But I mean, I'm not big on like intros and stuff.
I'll hit an A while you do that. I think it's an A. So
okay.
Like, I'll count it. Or
1, 2, 3, 4. When I'm walking beside her, people tell me I'm lucky. I will love her forever. Oh, my perfect cousin. What I like to do, he doesn't. He's his family's pride and joy. His mother's a little golden boy.
Wait, whoops.
I guess,
I'm sorry. I'm gonna rest.
That's why I went into My Perfect. We went from page 1 of Every Little Thing to My Perfect Cousin.
I was like, Tom, I like where your head's at when you jumped into
that. Do a medley.
I was like, this is sick. I didn't realize.
I'm like just blindly following the sheet music. Like when we've played like Beatles songs publicly, we have to like change the key because like their vocal, I mean, they're all like little guys, like 90 pounds each. So they're and it's hard to hit those. They're kind of like my dad used to say like the Beatles. Their vocal range is castrati. They're the
castrato.
Yeah.
That like. It's like, what are the odds? It's like that Paul McCartney and John Lennon were met in the same town, and we're both castrato.
Like I gotta either sing it in like a falsetto or like really like bounce it out. Every little thing, every little thing, every little thing, every little thing. Every little thing, every little thing she does is magic. Everything she does just turns me on. Even though that I mean, we go from Every Little Thing into Every Little Thing she does is magic, and then into My Perfect Cousin
by the Undertones. Dude, what a great.
And then we're telling a story.
Dude, when you went into that My Perfect Cousin, I thought you were vibing, and I was like, this is. I'm like, nice.
That's like one of the things Paul's talking about in there. He's like, we've got get back. You got to get back, and then on my way back home, and then I'm taking the long and winding road. He's like, we're telling a little story here. We're telling a story.
I also love to like in that in Get Back. When they're discovering these songs, it's like the notes start to appear, and you're like, "Oh my god!" You're
right, because you know the end point. Like they don't know the end point, but you do, and you're like, "What?" I'm like watching and hearing, Get Back. Like McCartney's just like he's just like grooving, and he's not exactly doing like the riff or anything. And then it like slowly starts to, and it's like, wait, he's playing Get Back, and then he starts, and then before you know, he's like, and it's like. You see it form like little by little, and then he has it like pretty far along. He's got it like pretty close to what it's gonna. But he's like, what's this name gonna be? Maybe this name could be that. Where are they from? Are they from here? Are they from there? And he's like, and he's not there. And then he like thinks like, oh, maybe we'll add like some political commentary to. So then he does this like whole verse with like Enoch Powell and like all this like British politics kind of stuff, and then. Eventually he's like, no, we'll just throw that stuff out, keep it lean.
Did John, I can remember, was he the one that came and said Tucson, Arizona? Or like,
I forget, somebody, yeah.
And I was like, oh my god, what, you take a time machine back, it's like, you just want to you put their hands right on the guitar, it's like, oh.
Yeah. And then like knowing where it's like that, knowing that, okay, their breakup's coming up, but then also knowing, okay, they're going to end up on the roof. When's somebody going to say, hey, let's go on the roof. Let's go take a smoke on the roof. And then it's like, hey, it's pretty nice up here. Then we could have a concert.
Like, watching this Get Back.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I love Donatello.
He's like,
Shredder knew it could. Splinter.
Heroes in a half shell.
Heroes in a half shell fighting for their mothers.
It's like, there was a rat training with his karate master.
Get back to the sewer. Get back to the ooze.
Surprised you didn't know Get Back was written about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
It sounds like, hey Muffy, we're going on our yacht. You sound like Thurston Howell.
I'm surprised you didn't know that it was about getting back to the sewer where they once belonged.
That was
secret of the ooze.
The ooze. Vanilla Ice comes in and then he started dancing.
Break down a wall and see Vanilla Ice dancing on the stage. We gotta do a Turtles 2 long form episode.
I feel like maybe we did, but I don't think we did.
I think it was
we did Turtles
pumping
1.
gas.
You see, like, they're not just making like the Let It Be album. It's like they're making like Abbey Road, and then they're also making like their next couple solo albums, like their song, Oh
yeah, when George was playing All Things Must Pass.
Yeah, and
those guys were like, they were like giving him, they were being a little like, it's all right, George.
John was playing a song called On the Road to Marrakesh, which like he later like turns into Jealous Guy. It's like, on the road to Marrakesh. Like, I'm just a child of nature. It don't take much to set me. And then because I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm just a jealous guy.
They're like You're right. They're working through like a ton of material.
Yeah, a lot of ground gets covered, and one of them is. This does end up on Let It Be is Across the Universe, which was part of our repertoire.
It was,
and I think when we played it, we changed the pitch just to like ease up on my voice a little bit, because it's
how's it get real?
Vocal cords get real tight.
Okay.
So it's B minor.
Yep.
To F sharp minor.
That's
Okay.
it. Yep.
Okay.
E minor 7 is just this.
Yeah, E minor 7.
That's it. And A7 is yep. That's it.
Yeah, it was just the F anything with F in it is like
it's always
tricky for me. So this is B minor and
that's it.
F sharp minor. Okay. this rain into a paper. They slither wildly as they slip away across the universe. Nothing's gonna change my world. Nothing's gonna change. Nothing's gonna change. Change. Shine.
Dude, that was great. The lighters.
Their lighters. And
it was.
And it was fun when we do our patter between songs, and we tell them like, oh yeah, here's an original. Here's the one we just wrote. Yeah.
It's like we finished this right before we came here.
Yeah, we'll see if you guys like it.
Played this, they were working on it. It was funny to see them do this like fast paced during. They were like speeding it up.
The Beatles Get Back episode of Total Recall Show. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli, on Instagram at Tom_Scioli, and check out my Patreon. Go to patreon.com and search Tom Scioli.
You can follow me on Instagram at cinema_tomb.
And so, yeah, like, how'd you like this Get Back? Like, it was a pretty big build-up to it.
Huge build-up. I didn't watch it as they were dropping. I was like, I'm going to wait till it's released. And then when I went in, I was like, oh, wow. Each episode's like almost 3 hours long.
Yeah, it's an epic. Yeah, I watched like each one like that. And it was kind of like, it was Thanksgiving weekend. And so it was like, Thanksgiving dinner's done. I'm not going to be doing anything else. Like I'm just like spent.
Take a load off.
Yeah, worn out, exhausted. So it's like I just like put on episode 1, just like.
Let it wash over you.
Yeah, exactly. Watch the whole thing and just like, it's just kind of like focused right on that and just like taking it all in. And
dude, I know for a fact once I finish this, I'm gonna like be revisiting this many times.
Yeah, it is like by the end of it, you feel like you are one of the Beatles. Like you're just, and like that's like a recurring dream. I have this like recurring dream where I'm like in this studio with the Beatles, and it's like I gotta learn the song, and I'm on the keyboard, and like nice. I'm Billy Preston, I guess, and I'm like trying to like keep up, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I can keep up with these guys. And then it's like watching this, it's like,
I totally with you there. I would like imagine me like walking in and pulling up a chair to their like little when they're like working on the songs and being like, would I be able to like
like this
hold my
this will probably fuel more of those dreams. I haven't had any dreams since I've seen this where like I'm
on the spot
in with the Beatles. Yeah.
The another takeaway like from this is that like besides them coming up with like the best songs, like their band practices are like. They're like a regular band, like regular jamming like process.
Yeah,
besides the end result.
You think like, you think there's like a magic there, where it's like, okay, we're the Beatles, and now, okay, we're doing,
something else.
Yeah, we're doing Get Back now, or we're doing this, but it is like they just show up, and I know like this one was different from their other sessions. Like it would be great if we had a documentary like this to go along with like every album.
Holy
but
shit.
It's just not it doesn't exist. But at this point, they were getting bored, I guess, with like just being the Beatles. And like even like Paul McCartney's like, we can't just keep putting out one album after album. We'll just be going in circles. And then like some of the other Beatles are kind of like, well, what's wrong with that? Like why not keep putting out he felt like you have to like, because it's the Beatles, you have to like build. You can't just. And so they set up this challenge for themselves, or Paul set up a challenge for them, where it's like, we're going to go into the studio with nothing, like deliberately come in with a blank slate and see what we can create, in the studio. Frame. Yeah,
that was interesting too. Him giving like a limitation, like talk about like under like can you do it under pressure?
Yeah, and like. Watching this, I also realized like they're doing this in January, and like January is kind of like the worst month. You're like all worn out from the holidays, and it's cold and dark, and there's not going to be any cool holidays for a while, and you're not going to be seeing the sun for a while, and so it's like, okay, of course they're going to be like kind of glum and cranky.
Yeah, they're like, all right, guys, let's go I guess we're going to go make Let It Be here. The Beatles rock out and interact with all the footage. It's like, if they were touring, say like the Beatles like showed up today and they're in a van, they have to tour around. I think Paul McCartney would be the guy that would be like, okay, I'm gonna go and check in. I'm gonna book the tour and check in with. When we get to the venue, I'm gonna go talk to like the guy inside, like to touch base with the venue guy and like set up all that stuff. Like he's like that guy. I think John Lennon would maybe make the T-shirts and like do the posters. George might do social media, and Ringo would be like I think they would probably practice at Ringo's. He'd have his drums there, and that's where they'd go to rock out.
Yeah, Ringo's kind of like there's a lot of drama from all the different members, like except for Ringo. Ringo's just kind of like, look, I'm whenever you guys want to start playing, I'm here on the drums. And like he had previously quit the group, like during the White Album. So I guess he had already had his little crisis, and now it's like, okay, this is what it is. This is the Beatles. I'm in it. You know,
underrated member. Like when he during the practices, he's like, it's great too. Seeing like when they're really getting stuff done. Like they're not like, it's like when somebody's trying to explain their idea, they're really not like playing over top of each other, or like Ringo's not like playing. Like I'm like, wow, okay, he's behind his kit. He's just like listening, not playing when they're trying to like,
chilled out. Yeah. His like, there's something going on with his face in this show where it's like I don't know if he's high or what, but he's just kind of like, you know, he's just got this very tranquil look on his face.
I'm loving it. He's like the Zen man. They got his, and I love his snare with like the towel over it.
Yeah,
gives it that like nice sound.
Yeah, I know like hearing about that for like Ringo didn't do the drums on Instant Karma, but like that was the thing I heard about Instant Karma where like they put like some kind of like towel or like a wet towel over the drum.
That's awesome. Is Ringo left-handed? I don't know.
Yeah, he's left-handed, but he plays a right-handed drum kit, and he says that's where he gets his kind of shuffle is just like the natural like having to play a thing that's like backwards. So like to go from here to here, he has to like kind of turn. So it adds like a little like a half beat or whatever, and that's where you get. That's what they said. That's where you get like his signature.
Sauce.
Yeah.
And I love his hi-hat work too. It's like he's like cleaning it off. Like
yeah, I mean, like as long as you got Ringo, you got a band. You know, which is kind of true. We know that about drummers. You know, the you know, like the front end, they get like all the credit and stuff. But like, you know, you don't have a band without a drummer.
No.
And the old days, the drummer would be like the leader of the band. You know, that's like a pre-rock and roll. It was Gene Krupa or whatever. You know, you'd have these like. And a lot of people assumed Ringo was the lead, like he was the oldest. And I know like the Queen thought that Ringo was the leader. She's like when they met the Queen, she was like, said to Ringo, are you the one who started the band? He's like, no, actually, I was the last to join. Movies and stuff like Hard Day's Night and stuff. He's kind of like Ringo's kind of treated as like the unfortunate kid or something, but he's like the oldest one. He was like a celebrity before any of the other Beatles were. Like they kind of looked up to him because he was like already part of an established band that kind of had a following, and they were kind of like, there's Ringo. And then it's like when they got a chance to have Ringo play with them, they're like, please, you know.
When George was trying to get his ideas across, it was getting kind of tense because like I'm like, it seemed that Paul and John were going hard on George, and it was kind of like stressing me out. And he's like, I don't think. He's like, I'll do whatever you want me to do, I'll do it, but I don't think
if you want me to play, I'll play. If you don't want me to play, I won't play. I'll play how you want me to play, you know. And then he quits the Beatles, you know. You got so much, like, baggage and, like, knowledge already, so it's like, you know, you kind of come into this with the understanding that, like, George was kind of treated as, like, the little brother, because he was, like, I don't know, a year or two younger than Paul and John. And so he was like just a kid when they all got together. I mean, they were all kids, but he was really a kid. Like you see those pictures, and he's just like this little guy. And it's like, you know, John and Paul are the leaders, and they're the songwriters, and he kind of has to do what they say. And like now he's coming into his own as a songwriter. You know, maybe at this point might even be like the superior songwriter in the Beatles, and he's got it's still the same dynamic that they had when they were, you know, like when he was like 15 years old, and it's getting a little old for him, you know.
Yeah, he's like, I'll play whatever you want me to play. He's like, I don't think you know what you want me to play.
Yeah, it like he's making good points, and Paul is, he's kind of bending over back, like he's kind of like
okay, I want you to do this, 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 and this. But if you don't want to do that, you want to do something else, that's fine too. But this is,
like he's kind of like bending over backwards to not offend George, but then that's kind of annoying too. You know?
And also when Paul's like his ideas on when he's navigating that, they're correct. Like his like. The ideas that he's having are like, I'm like, oh yeah, Paul's right. It's
well, I mean,
it's so rough.
They said they have like an arrangement where if I wrote the song, I'm in charge, and I, kind of tell everybody else what they're doing, and if somebody else writes the song, then they're the boss or whatever. And so that's kind of the dynamic. And like Paul, it's pretty clear with it, and and he has this vision, like in like subsequent interviews with like John Lennon, he'll say like he'll say that like Paul, like if it was John's song, they'd be kind of like loosey goosey with it, but then if it was Paul's song, they'd make sure like every little detail was done perfectly to a T, and then he kind of resented that like like Paul would kind of put them through the ringer for his songs, but then if it was a John song, it was like, hey, let's do something goofy, let's do something experimental. Which again, like kind of like thinking about that, it's like a lot of those John songs are like kind of the most memorable Beatles songs because they do something, like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds isn't like a typical Beatles arrangement. Strawberry Fields isn't a typical Beatles arrangement. But then like, something like, Hey Jude or The Long and Winding Road or something is like very polished, very Beatlesy, and, maybe not as memorable as those.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Kind of weirder John songs.
With the John like taking like the little more risks. Mm-hmm. Not to say these are the Beatles. I'm like,
we kind of have like ideas in our heads of like who the Beatles are. Like watching this, you definitely see like Paul is like, he's like a workhorse. He wants to get in, and he's got a bunch of like, he's like, okay, I got this one, I got this one, I got this one. Like he's steamrolling ahead, and then the other Beatles kind of like, I don't know that I want to be here. This isn't really. And John has like just gotten together with Yoko not too long before this, and like that's all he wants to do. And Paul, it's funny how self-aware they are, because there's all this stuff we know about the Beatles that I think of as being like, like a hindsight kind of thing, but they're in the thick of it, and they're commenting on so like Paul's talking about like, 50 years from now we break up because Yoko was sitting on an amp, and then he even makes a comment to John where he says like, John, after we're all done with this, are you just gonna go put yourself in a bag in the Royal Albert Hall and stuff? And it's like, wow, they're like really,
Oh my god.
It's like all that Beatles stuff. It's happening in real time.
It's like if only these guys knew. It's like, you guys don't understand. It's like the director of Lord of the Rings, is gonna take this footage, and then it's gonna be streaming on an app called Disney Plus. You're never gonna believe it.
Well, that's good. Like all this stuff that they're talking about in this of like, what's this thing gonna be? What's it gonna end up being? Are people gonna be bored? Is it? And then it's like, you're watching that thing, so you're like,
it's so amazing.
Yeah, it becomes this like really great thing that took 50 years or whatever to like surface, and now it's coming to fruition, and even this thing that they probably at the time regarded as a failure. It's like, we didn't end up doing a live show. I mean, we did the rooftop concert, which again is like this legendary thing. It was kind of like a bunt. They were planning this home run, they do a bunt, but then it's like that rooftop performance is like the iconic like Beatle moment, like of all their performances and stuff. It's that rooftop one is
the first time I heard about the rooftop one, I saw the Simpsons.
The Simpsons version,
before I saw
the B flats,
the B flats
or the B sharps.
Before, and I was like, what are they riff? My mom was like, had to explain to me it was the Beatles.
Well, because like the original incarnation of this movie, which was like like an hour and 20 minutes or whatever, called Let It Be, this movie, it was never released in the United States as far as I know. Like I saw it in high school because a friend of mine, my friend Chris, he had like a bootleg of it, on VHS. So I got to see it like in high school.
Oh wow!
And and it was,
I'd never seen it before.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And it is like it is a little more of a bummer than this. Like, it does have ups and downs. It does end on a high note. Like, it does sort of end with the rooftop concert, and it is kind of cool. But the kind of like the context of it, because like when it came out after the Beatles had broken up. So it was like, oh, we're watching the Beatles break up. When like they actually didn't break up. They do this thing, and then they do Abbey Road, and then they break up. So it's like it's just
not really the end.
Yeah. Like, it would be kind of cool if there was also a documentary of the making of Abbey Road. You get kind of like the making of like half of it. There's like or maybe like a third of Abbey Road comes out in these sessions.
Excited.
But like with Abbey Road, it was like, okay, we did this experiment for Let It Be. We don't really have anything. Let's just forget all this camera stuff. Let's just do it the way we used to do it with. Because that was another curveball they gave themselves with this project, was we're not going to do any overdubs. We're just going to perform the songs from start to finish live. Like they did it in the very, very beginning, and kind of like make like real, raw rock and roll. And they were at this time, the big album was the band's music from Big Pink.
Oh yeah.
And like, I don't know if that really was all done in like, with no overdubs or whatever, or if that was just like, word on the street or whatever. But like, that was what they were shooting for, was like this kind of like raw sound, and that was, and it's kind of funny thinking back of like that because I feel like that album's kind of in a different context now, but back then it was like, whoa, what is this? This is like so like raw and immediate, and
This is now making me want to watch rewatch the Talking Heads, Stop Making Sense, and The Last Waltz. I think we gotta do those down.
I'm curious what the reaction is to it, because like I loved it. Like, I'm a huge Beatles fan, and I'm also like, I love stuff about the creative process, and this is so
oh my God.
Like just all about how you create something from nothing, and all the strife and all the turmoil, and how you how you end up with something, and you're not even sure if you have anything, and then you realize you actually do. Seeing things gestate. So I love all that stuff, but I don't know how like like the general public would react, because it's like as like an entertain. I don't know how this racks up as like an entertainment, and it feels like it's almost like ripe for parody. Like, I love it, and I think it's awesome and great. But like, if we were a different kind of YouTube show, like we could like really skewer it, really,
We should be wearing our shaggy Beatles fur jackets, like.
Well, just like, oh my God, it's so fucking boring and monotonous. Like, you could, come at it from that angle, and even within it, they're like they have this like huge, this like entourage. Their entourage isn't actually that out of control. Like, I've seen like some Rolling Stones documentaries where it's like there's like just a ton of people everywhere. Seeing all the different types too, because then you have these like business suit guys, and then you have like guys who are kind of like in a business suit but then have like a mod kind of cool haircut.
Oh, I know.
And then you got just like total nerds with like bottle cap glasses.
I was thinking about that, like, so they're working on the album, they're doing like a regular legit band practice, and I was like, how, I know they're the Beatles, but it's like that kind of stuff would happen like in your basement or in your room, and they're doing this and vibing out and being natural and creating. But like you said, there's like the electricians right there. There's like 4 guys right behind you. The people are bothering them.
This isn't a comfortable space, because they start out in like a movie studio, in like Twickenham studio, because like Ringo's going to do The Magic Christian. He's in that movie with Peter Sellers, The Magic Christian.
I don't know that one.
Oh yeah, you should check it out. It's not a great movie, but it has a great song in it. It has "If You Want It, Here It Is, Come and Get It." It's almost like an Apple production movie.
Oh man, I'm tracking that down.
But like, so they're filming that, and then they're kind of like, oh, we have like an extra studio that we're not going to have to move into for a couple weeks, but we have it rented. So if you want to do your thing there, so then they do their rehearsal / writing / recording / movie, with the idea that they're going to do some kind of big performance somewhere, and this is all, and they are kind of like we're not exactly sure what shape this thing's going to take, but it's going to take some kind of shape, and then it does,
Yeah.
Like in some ways, like initially it becomes, a documentary about the breakup of the Beatles. That's like the original incarnation of Let It Be, and then the performance is the rooftop performance. But now it's like this really like nuanced thing where you're just there with them.
It's unbelievable.
I could see, like, when I watched it, I like laser focused on like every detail, but I could see it almost being like ambient music or something, where you just kind of have this on, and you're like, it's almost like you're one of the technicians, like making yourself a cup of tea. And
I'm their roadie that brings them those delicious looking orange the goblets with that liqueur or whatever they have in there. I was like, that looks tasty.
I like their tea time too, where like, the lady comes out with like a tray that's just like filled with teacups that are filled to the brim with like milk already added, and she's like walking with, and there's like little tea splashing and stuff. I got really hungry watching this, and
makes me want to take up smoking.
Yeah, right. That was one of the guys in the Entourage comments. He says, "We're making a movie about nose pickers, nail biters, and chain smokers." But yeah, they're smoking. They're doing all the stuff, like the sort of Keith Richards kind of stuff where you put your cigarette in your guitar.
Love it.
I think like George at one point he has this like errant kind of like string sticking out, and then he sticks his cigarette on the string.
Never saw that. One of my bucket list items was, even though I don't smoke, was to light a cigarette and put it in the headstock of a guitar while I'm playing. And like I thought that was so fucking cool. But then like never saw somebody put a cigarette on the string, and I'd be like. Yeah. For some reason, they brought a thing of gasoline over and a person to play.
Well, we got it playing over here, and you see there's like a tray of like bagels or something behind George. Like so yeah, you see all the food, and they have like this kind of like toast rack, which looks like something that maybe like your great grandmother might have had. It's this toast rack with all these like slices of toast, and the slices of toast, like it's all this like shitty British food, like. The toast looks like somebody sat on it and then put it in these things. And then they got like their marmalade. They got knives and
love marmalade.
And then they got all these cookies. Like they're chomping on all this like shit. You'd think the Beatles would have like better. They'd have like a little more deluxe spread. They're the Beatles, but it is like, okay, they're still in England. They're still getting this shitty.
Dude, I'm recreating everything. I'm doing the cigarette in the headstock, and then I'm gonna put Smucker's marmalade on bread, and then have a plumber sit on it and fart.
Now, like
to recreate.
Are there any like Italians in London? Like, is there any good food? Is there any like Italian restaurant or something that they later became like a computer company? And, yeah, that's kind of a funny story. It was like the Beatles, like Apple Computer came around, and they asked the Beatles, like they asked Apple Corp for permission to use the name Apple for their computer business, and the Beatles or Apple Corp or whatever said to them, "You can use the name Apple as long as you never enter the music business." And it's like, of course we're not entering. We're making these like for hobbyists or whatever. Of course we're. And then like in the 90s, Apple creates like a MIDI, like an MIDI thing for the computer that you can like kind of compose music with. The Beatles sued them. Like Apple sued them and said, "We had an agreement. You weren't going to enter the music business. Now you're entering the music business." And I don't know exactly how it went down, but like Apple's definitely in the music business now.
That's so funny that they're like, once
like
again,
iTunes
I could have
said,
it's like, we'll be back with the iPod. We'll be back with the preloaded U2 iPods.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, that's why it's not like a preloaded Beatles iPod.
I remember first like vibing on the Beatles hard whenever they had Free as a Bird.
Right, yeah, the Beatles anthology. And they had like, it was kind of like this. It was like this big build up. It was Disney also, because it was ABC. was going to have like this 3-part or 2-part documentary series of the Beatles. And
dude, I remember like my parents were like, my mom was like, we gotta watch this, and there was a countdown timer. It said countdown before they premiered Free as a Bird. It said countdown to new Beatles music, and this clock was like,
yeah, because they were gonna premiere like John Lennon was dead, but the other three Beatles were still alive, and they were gonna have 2 new Beatles songs, and like they were going to use like existing recordings of John, and then the other 3 were going to sort of come in and like turn it into something else. And ABC, their promo was they became A Beatles. C was it?
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's amazing.
And I remember like when it came out, my aunt saying like she was disappointed because she thought it was going to be a little more like entertainment driven, because it was like a documentary about the Beatles, and then it was interspersed a little bit with like little like interviews with them now and stuff. But she thought it was going to be like you turn it on and it's like, you know, the Ed Sullivan show, or like some kind of variety show, and here's the Beatles now, you know, like playing a song, you know, which would have been cool. Like I understand, but like I thought, oh, you know, that was kind of odd that she was disappointed by it. But yeah, I get it. I'm thinking like I need to ask her what she thinks of this, because if she thought that wasn't entertainment, like this is definitely not designed as an entertainment. This is, you know,
you're right, Tom. This is like, I'm fucking obsessed, and this is like Beatles ASMR.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Like, I can't get.
I mean, I am thoroughly entertained and thoroughly interested, but like my like you know, I'm just coming at it from a different angle than like somebody who's just kind of like, hey, entertain me, you know, like.
I always want, like, whenever they're sitting around jamming, working on songs, I'm always obsessed. Like, okay, like I just want to hear when they're playing together. Okay, stop playing you 3. I just want to hear Paul's bass tone for a second, or like I want to hear what that George's amp sounding like, or like he's got his Les Paul. Yeah,
there is that part, and then like George is kind of doing this like really low kind of, and it is kind of like it is kind of cool, you know.
There's the tray. George's guitar falls over and knocks that tray over.
There's like a scene, because again, so much of it plays into like how much you know about the Beatles story, but there's like a part where John Lennon's like, I talked to Alan Klein last night, and he's like, he was amazing. And he's like going on and on about how much he loves Alan Klein, and how Alan Klein, he knows more about us. He knows you. He's talking to George, he's like, he knows you like I know you. He know, you know, and he's like going on and like just knowing that like Alan, like that the Beatles, you know, flash forward a couple years, they do not like Alan Klein anymore. You know, like they have like a big falling, like it ends up being a disaster for them, and it is in a way like Alan Klein is kind of like what breaks up the Beatles, like actually like really breaks it up, because it was like they needed new management. You know, Brian Epstein's dead. They needed a manager, and Paul's like, I want Lee Eastman, who is like his father-in-law, and then the other Beatles are like, we want Alan Klein, and Paul's like, I don't want Alan Klein, you know, for, you know, whatever reason. And then the other Beatles are like, well, we don't want your father-in-law, you know, to be. There's that cigarette on the street.
I tell you what, Paul, I don't know. I don't want to look. Well, first of all, I need to get that black turtleneck.
Yeah, a lot of good looks. You know, it's funny because some of them come in with these like crazy rock and roll, you know, fur coat, kind of like purple shirt kind of looks, and then the next day they come in, you know, like very like, you know, just like very drab and ordinary, like not too rock and roll, you know.
Yeah, John said that he's like, I'm wearing continuity clothes. He's like, my armpits are growing moss. He's like,
yeah, John is very funny in this. He's very funny. He's living up to his reputation. He's wearing Bobos too. He's wearing like shitty sneakers.
No!
His
Kmart kickers. Yeah. Again, it's Beatles ASMR. So when he was sitting there, he's got, you know, playing the guitar with his like white dirty. It looks like he mowed the lawn right before he started. He's like, well, you wouldn't believe it. He's like, I'm gonna write a legendary song, but first I gotta wear these Reeboks out to cut the grass.
Well, because I guess those are like the two components of rock and roll. The one component of rock and roll is like, I'm gonna shock you with this outrageous, crazy, the outfit I'm wearing, these colors that are going to sear your eyes. And then there's the other aspect of rock and roll where it's like, hey man, I'm rock and roll. I don't care.
Man.
You know, show up with, you know, whatever shitty kind of clothes I have on, you know.
It's like, I'm going to show up in these tatters, man.
Yeah.
They're like, dude, your jeans, the butt has fallen out of You're so grunge. Your both ass cheeks are hanging out. Hey Kurt, is that what you meant by the muddy banks of the Wichita?
I like Ringo's drum setup. I like the I mean, maybe this is like a common thing, but like where on his cymbals, he has like this like little thing screwed into them with like a bunch of mini cymbals on it.
Oh yeah,
is that like a typical thing?
My friend Frank, his drum set, he has that on there too, and it's like he put it on top of his hi-hat, and we would play with that on there, and like I love that. I don't know if it's like a tambourine kind of like thing or something, but it's great. And I was also checking out how high Ringo had his drum throne. He was sitting pretty high on it, like above. Like
he's in the catbird seat.
He's in the catbird seat.
You know, and there's all these scenes. There's all these scenes where it's like just Paul and John, and it's like, okay, you know, we're doing. But then there's this, and writing songs and stuff. But then there's like a scene towards the end where it's like Ringo and George kind of like becoming like a songwriting duo and stuff, and that was kind of fun to see. It's like, hey, we can do this. We can team up too. You guys think you guys don't
underestimate
the back to the rhythm section.
The rhythm section. And
I guess they're not. I don't know if they'd be the rhythm because like
the bass
Paul would be the rhythm section, you know, being the bass, but
I like too whenever he was giving them I think they were doing Get Back, and Paul was like, yeah, George, you should like do the upstrum whenever with Ringo, and it's like Get Back, and I was like, oh, nice tip on with George, and like
the iconic part of the original version of this movie, like aside from like the rooftop concert, the thing that you always remember is like George, you know, saying to Paul, like, I'll play if you want me to play, I won't play if you want me to don't, you know, like that's like the memorable thing, and I guess because this thing's longer, like it is an important moment, but it's not like the focus, you know.
Dude, guess what? I don't know if I was, once again, I'm always huffing gas, but I think Peter Jackson said there's an even, like, he's going to release an even bigger cut.
Well, that's what I heard about, because, like, what's his name? George Martin's son, I forget his name, but his last name's Martin, but George Martin's son is involved in this, too, and, like, he was talking about how, like, they had a lot of decisions to make. Look, there's the toast that they sat.
Oh, yeah, the plumber farted on that.
It's like Wonder Bread.
We're going to have the electrician. He's like, all right, where do you want these cables?
Well, because I think, like, you know, it was kind of like the 80s was when, like, sort of like, you know, gourmet food or whatever went mainstream and stuff. So it's still like the 60s. You know, we're still coming out of, like, rations from like World War II and stuff.
Hey, we're gonna rock out and write this song. Let me pop this World War II ration, mate. Oh, look, there's a piece of some biscuits, a caramel.
Yeah, it's like
some coffee.
Who wants some botulism?
Are you sure that can was sealed, Ringo? I didn't hear a hiss when you cried. We got a concert in 6 days. Did you hear a hiss when you... I said, ooh, Wrigley Corporation, packaged in the... I didn't hear a hiss. Be careful with that. That mincemeat you got in there, Ringo. George isn't going to make practice. He ate there was some fur on those biscuits in that ration.
You know, that's like, because the accent you're doing is like a British accent, but it's like the Beatles. They talk, you know, it's like, oh, the British invasion, all these British, but like the Beatles, like they're not really like British isn't the right word because they're actually more like Irish, like the Liverpool, like their backgrounds. And they're sort of like culturally Irish, and Liverpool is like this very Irish area of it's in England, but they are like ethnically Irish. You know, their accent isn't like they don't like when you watch the Beatles cartoon or something like the Beatles Saturday morning cartoon. It'd be like, "Hello, I'm John Lennon. Oh, I'm Paul McCartney," but they don't talk like that.
They actually talk more like a brogue. It's more like an Irish brogue.
And when you think of it that way, and they like politically, they don't identify with Britain. That like they view Britain as the oppressor. Like they sing songs about the Irish like and in sort of like the Troubles. You know, they would like identify with the Irish and they're all Catholic. They're not proud. They're like their grandparents and stuff are like, Irish Catholics.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
They're more Pierce Brosnan than
Right.
than Daniel Craig.
Yeah, like,
That's what you're right. I'm hearing more like.
yeah, then it starts to make sense.
Making sense,
Of like,
Tom.
yeah. And that accent, that like weird accent, it's like, oh yeah, it is. It's more like Irish influence.
I think I had the undertones on the brain.
My perfect cousin.
Ringo, be careful. Look what I've got for band break.
Ringo's got a fur-lined sheepskin jacket.
George was good on some booty, yo!
Careful, Ringo. Did you hear a hiss when you cracked that World War II ration?
Ringo flicked the kick, but I didn't know.
George has a degree in physics and bionics.
It's funny, like, the iconic moment in the original version was George saying, oh, if you want me to play, I'll play. If you don't want me to play, I won't play. The iconic moment in this is when Ringo says, I farted. he's like, I just want to let you know I farted. I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to just keep it to myself, but I thought it would be best to let you know. And like you see like Paul McCartney like run away as soon as he says it.
Dude, it's fucking spectacular because before it's like it wouldn't be a proper rock dog if there wasn't a fart in the studio. Because there's an amazing fart in this Metallica documentary where it's like James Hetfield like farts and almost makes Bob Rock vomit. So I'm like, okay, the Beatles have to have a great fart scene.
Well, like, okay, here's where they messed up. You don't hear it. Maybe it was silent but deadly, which I'm getting the impression, because otherwise Ringo wouldn't have to say anything. But
Paul didn't have 2 white streaks in his hair.
I'm glad Peter Jackson resisted the temptation to do some Foley work.
Now, wait. I think we need to do the Total Recall show. Edit.
Yeah.
The
Total Reek.
They sent it to Weta Workshop. The nastiest fart.
Accent on wet.
It's like Peter Jackson's like during the preview. He's like, we wanted to enhance the Beatles Get Back experience. We sent it to the creative folks at Weta.
in Smell-O-Vision. We're doing it in Smell-O-Vision.
It's like
for authenticity. Just scratch the number 4, and you'll smell Ringo's fart.
Talk about a wet print. And it's like you hear like
a mind can blow those clouds away.
That's what the lyric is. Paul runs the restroom and pukes. He's like,
well, that's what the build up to this was really like something, and I was like, because like I listened to the Beatles channel on satellite radio and stuff, and like, and also because this thing got delayed so much, it's just been such a build up, and I like can't wait, and so I'm listening to all these like interviews and stuff, and like I don't know who it was, maybe Peter Jackson or somebody else that was maybe there at the time, but they're saying like this was always characterized as being like so ugly, like the Let It Be, like seeing this like ugly breakup of this band and how, and he was like, if you compare this to other bands, it's actually not very ugly. Like they're actually very articulate, very open about their feelings. Like they're not just like, oh fuck you, I hate you. It's which you would see with like other bands.
They're talking.
Yeah, or like the Who, where they like famously get in all these fistfights. They seem like people who've been like in like therapy or something, couples therapy or group therapy. Yeah, where they're like, and even like when they get in the fights where like, Paul's like, hey, I'll do this and not do that. Like they're all very like emotionally mature, and even like Ringo with his fart is like very emotionally mature. He's not like, ah, fuck you, I just farted. He's like, I thought about it. I could have said nothing, but I realized that was the wrong thing. Like, even their fart is kind of like is handled in a mature way.
Yeah, it's like because I see like
Paul acts like his shit doesn't stink. He acts like he's never farted.
Paul's like
he does like a beeline for the door when Ringo says that.
like, Paul's writing these great songs. He's handling his business. Like, he's doing, like, he's writing at the piano. Different teams are coming up to him to get, like, talk about, like, the business of the band stuff. And I'm like, how old is Paul? I'm like, please don't tell him please don't say he's 10.
He's only, like, half your age. Yeah.
10 years younger than me. Like, he's, like, taking care of his business. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're the boys, like, they grow up fast. They grew up they leave home at an early age, go to Germany, and kind of like, and then they're kind of done. Like, I mean, they all have like these long careers after this. Like, it's not like the Beatles is the end of the road for them. Like, they have these long careers, and it is like there's a part in this where George is like, I'm thinking, because he keeps coming in. He's like, I just wrote this song last night, and he plays. It's awesome. He plays this song, and he's like, I'm thinking of. He's like, I've basically written, the next like 20 years worth of songs, like based on like, he gets like 1 or 2 tracks per Beatle album. He's like, I've written like 20 years. So like, I'm thinking maybe I'll just record my own album, like just me, just to kind of get them out there, and then I can move on with my life and stuff. And, rather than, because he'd been giving them away, there's like Jackie Lomax does Sour Milk Sea, like he'd been giving them out, but it's like, why don't I just do them like as me? And John is even kind of a little like, wait, well then what happens to the Beatles every day? And he's like, well, it's like a separate kind of thing. But it just seems like, and with Paul talking about how like we've done it all, like where do you go from here, and trying to come up with these like little hoops that they can jump through to kind of like the natural place to go is kind of like, okay, we've done everything you can do as a Beatle. Now we just got to kind of go off on our own and like, start our own little colonies,
I tell you what, like, I know the Stones were just playing and everything, and we got, some of the classic rockers are still doing their thing. If the Beatles hadn't broken up, I feel like they would have still put out a ton of more, like, even, like, they would still be somehow, like, I don't think they would have, I think it would have kept going. There's no, like, seeing with how they're doing it, and, like, it just doesn't make any sense that they would, I feel like they would still be doing it now.
I feel like it was inevitable. Like, you kind of also see this pressures they're under, where it's like, hey, we're the Beatles. Like, you can kind of feel the weight of like, oh, we're the Beatles. We got to do, like, everything's got to be great, and everything's got to be better than the last thing. And we just kind of had this, kind of embarrassment with like the Magical Mystery Tour TV show, and we did something that was kind of loosey-goosey with Magical Mystery Tour, and then it flopped, and it was like our first flop, and now like what do we do? And now we're doing something else that's kind of loosey-goosey too, and it's like, we're the Beatles, it's a lot to live up to, like you're kind of like,
and also your like Wings is still, it's like
you see that like each one of them was able to sustain like a successful, career on their own, and you also see what's missing. Like you hear some of these Wings songs, and it is kind of like, oh yeah, this is like what, like Paul McCartney without John Lennon adding this, or without Ringo coming in with or George having his little thing. Like you kind of see, and like Paul McCartney on his own, John Lennon on his own, and like especially George Harrison on it. Like George is the one where like, All Things Must Pass is like this, amazing, probably the best solo Beatles album. And then Ringo has some great albums too, because all the other Beatles come in, and Harry Nilsson and stuff, like they sort of come in and because everybody loves nobody doesn't like Ringo, so
I like how John called it a Harris song.
Harris songs. Well, that's like if you're playing like Beatles sheet music, some of them it'll be like Northern songs, copyright Northern songs, and then some of them will be copyright Harris songs. So that's like his actual, when he calls it Harris songs, that's like, Harrison's actual like,
oh, that's awesome,
company, his publishing entity. Around this time, like there's a lot of hostility from like the British government towards the rock and rollers. Like they like they're trying, and they started around this time talking about a super tax, where they were going to tax like sort of like the wealthiest people, and the Beatles and the Stones, like they'd get hit with this tax where like when in Taxman, George Harrison's talking about 1 for you, 19 for me, like that's what they were talking about, where it would be like,
wow,
you'd get like 1/20th. You'd get to keep 1/20th, and then the government gets 19/20ths of your income. That's a big part of like the pressures that add to the Beatles too. That's kind of why they had to form this Apple company, is to just kind of like
keep them back.
Yeah, move these assets so that it's not just like getting like vacuum hosed out of their pockets. And that's why like the Rolling Stones become like tax exiles. That they leave the country just to like avoid that stuff.
Dude, this is incredible. We're so fortunate to have this.
I'm
awesome. Excited
like
to see the next parts.
Yeah, it feels like a culmination of like just something that's just been in the works for all this time. It's just a great document, and again, like it would be cool to have something like this with every album, but this is the only one we have. And that like rooftop performance, you see like the local constabulary, the bobbies or whatever, coming around. They come in the door and they're like,
"What are you doing? You need to shut this down. You're causing a public disturbance."
And blah, blah, blah. And like you're thinking like, wow, like the Beatles. This is the last performance. Like nobody's ever gonna hear the Beatles play live ever again. This is it, and it's something to celebrate. And it's this magical moment. And it's like, sorry, we gotta shut this down. We're the powers that be are like, and it does, and it's like, yes. Maybe there's like permits that they could have gotten and didn't, and this and that. But you're gonna make sure no magic is gonna happen on my watch and stuff. And you're watching it unfold. But then like a little later, the young guys. Then a little later, like the chief or whatever shows up, and he's like super. He's like, "Hey, can I come in?" And he's like, "Hey, come on, let me go upstairs." And stuff. And then like it's kind of like they don't show it, but you get the impression that like he gets it. And he's like, "Oh yeah, the Beatles. This is great. Let's keep this going." And then you see like John Lennon's hands are cold. He's like, I can't make the colds. My hands are freezing. And then like they kind of wrap up. The concert's over, and then they're like downstairs listening to it, and they're like loving it. And then some of the people are like, "Oh, so tomorrow we'll go back on the roof and do like the rest of the set." And George was like. And Paul and stuff, they're like, no, we did the roof. We're done. That's it. We got what we need. And George is like, you know what? We'll make it look like the police shut us down, and people will think that. And so it's like, oh wow, this whole thing was a work.
Oh.
Like George didn't want to go up on the roof in the first place, and it is like it's always been sort of, you got the impression watching the old Let It Be that it's like, oh, the police shut the thing down. It's done. But it's kind of like. No, once it got up to the higher ups, they were like, "Oh no, this is great. Fine. This is the Beatles. Yeah, let's." And they want to sit in and watch too. And
I play a little six string.
Exactly, and they could have come back and done it the next day too. It's just the Beatles didn't want to do it anymore. And they're like, "Yeah, this is kind of cool because then it looks like we're like these outlaws, and they're like the police are shutting us down."
Well, they're like they pull the plug right out of the wall.
Well, Ringo has said on interviews that like he was when they're up there, he was kind of hoping that like they'd get footage of like police like carrying him, like dragging him away from his.
That's awesome.
From his drums, and they are like early on when those like young guys first show up, they're kind of like,
we're gonna start arresting people if you don't shut down this noise. We're gonna start making arrests.
We're gonna start arresting people, and just like being on the roof because like they're playing all these songs and like a couple of them kind of get into their final form, but then when they're on that roof. There's this like jolt of adrenaline they're getting just from being up there, and probably the cold too, because it was like a cold January day, and like everybody's wearing a thick fur coat except Paul. So Paul's probably like extra icy, and it's making him a little bit saucy and stuff. And then it's like, it's cool how Peter Jackson does this, like track after track. They're like, this is the one that ends up on the album. This is the one that ends up. So like it's really gelling and really coming together on this like rooftop performance. And then when the police show up. Paul kind of looks behind him, and then he like gets like an extra jolt of like adrenaline, like, and they're sort of saying all through this video, like,
when our backs are up against the wall, that's when we do our best stuff,
and and like you see it, that happens, and then when they're like, the guys working for them are like, okay, so do you want to do this again tomorrow? Go back up on the roof and do the other half. Like, no, we did that, and then kind of like the end credits is like them in the studio doing like. The last couple
Dude, songs. I'm gonna start crying like when I watch that part. I'm gonna get choked up. I know it's gonna. I don't want to get. Maybe It's like I gotta see the last part. I know the first part ended with they're going to have a meeting at was it Ringo's house?
Well, they're gonna go to because part one ends. George quits, and then part one ends, and they're gonna go to a meeting at George's house. We don't see the meeting, and then they come back, and it's like John hasn't come back. You don't see this as much on camera, but obviously there's also like a thing going on between John and Paul.
Didn't really pick that up.
Yeah, it like because it's sort of off camera. Like there's like a one reference to it or something where like John's saying something and then somebody's talking about like repairing the wound like between him and Paul, and I guess it's like there's like some tension and I think like Yoko coming in because it was like him and Paul are like partners, and then he meets Yoko, and now John and Yoko are partners, and it kind of creates this thing, and she like she's just hanging out.
I know,
like it's like okay, where the Beatles were playing now. There's a bunch of people all like kind of milling around and stuff, but then they're sitting down to play, and then here's John Lennon, and then you're Yoko. It's like right there, and
it is pretty.
And
ridiculous.
she's just like she's knitting, she's reading the paper, and it's like she's not doing anything bad, she's not doing anything intrusive, but she's like there's. What's your girlfriend doing here? And she's knitting. It's hard to concentrate on me notes when your girlfriend's sitting there knitting like we're putting her to sleep with the bloody Beatles playing her hearts out. And you go, she's doing her crosswords. She's doing her crosswords while I'm trying to play the bass. And then, and it's like that in itself could be kind of like, you're just kind of playing and then you look over and it's like, why,
I mean,
why are you falling asleep? And then you can kind of see a little bit of like tit for tat because then it's like the next day. Now Paul brings Linda in. It's like, two can play at this game. You brought your girlfriend. I'm bringing my girlfriend.
It is, but like you're right. You're so right. And then, but like Paul, yeah, it's like okay, your family's visits the thing. But it's like okay, well, Linda's heading out now.
Right.
Anybody else want to think about heading out of the studio now? Like
yeah, right.
Linda's leaving.
Yeah.
There goes Linda.
Linda's kind of like, oh hey, I want to go to the bathroom. Hey, you want to come with me? Anybody want to come with me?
She's like, Linda's like, hey, I'm leaving. Is there anybody else that might want to leave the studio here?
There's a part that I was laughing at where, like. Linda makes like a suggestion, and Paul's like, "Oh, why don't you keep it to yourself, Yoko?" He calls Linda Yoko. I couldn't believe it. Like that, I couldn't believe they were that like sort of like self-aware and like sort of ironic.
You're so right. Like this is stuff that you thought people were like zeroing in from like
like maybe in like a 1979 interview or something.
Yeah.
You'd be like, "Oh yeah, Yoko showed up," and
yeah.
Oh yeah, because like and Linda talks about that of like how she feels like Yoko is kind of speaking as if she's speaking for John, but it's like she wonders how much of it's like Yoko, because you see Yoko and Linda having like a little side conversation, and you do kind of like you don't hear it, and so you kind of wonder, and it's like oh they look like they're hitting it off, and then like Linda like reports back, she's like at the snitch, she's like reporting back and like.
Hey,
so
Linda, what was Yoko saying?
Did she say anything about me? Did she talk any shit on me? And then it's like a couple days later, then Ringo's wife shows up. I think like George's wife shows up the least. I think she shows up for like 1 second. And like you realize like, oh, I get why John's not letting Yoko out of his sight. Because like George Harrison's wife is like fucking Eric Clapton the whole time. Yeah. This thing's going on. Like George should have had his wife in there with him, and maybe it would have kept Eric Clapton at bay a little bit.
We talked about what's his face, John Denver cooking Margot. Like their George Harrison, I've noticed has a Eric Clapton complex in this because about like 7 times he's like. Hey, you think you might want to bring in Clapton replace me? He keeps putting himself down. I'm like, you're George fucking Harrison.
When George quits, John's like, let's get Eric Clapton. And it's like, he's already fucking George's wife, baby. Well, why can't we replace him here? He can fuck us too, here.
He's
I'll play the chords if you like.
You always get annoyed when I say that. I'm trying to help, but I always hear myself annoying you, and I'm trying to... No, you're not annoying me. You don't annoy me anymore.
He's like... maybe she's like, I can't do this, Paul. Maybe you should bring in Eric.
He can fuck your
He
wife
can
too.
fuck your wife. He's
He's fucking my wife. He might as well fuck you fellas.
I don't think I can. It's like, you need someone that can solo better. Why don't you bring in that fuck machine, Eric?
My wife keeps telling me how great Eric Clapton is.
It's like, I found a number written down. But it was listed as fuck machine. I called it. It was Eric Clapton. Machine Clapton.
Paul McCartney was on, again, like the sort of spoof you could do with this, but like, McCartney was on Howard Stern, and like Howard Stern was saying something like, you know, if like, how did you feel about Eric Clapton with the George thing? He's like, yeah, I didn't like it, and then it was something of like, you know, if George wanted all you guys to go beat up Eric Clapton, would you have gone with them? He's like, well, I don't think I would have. I think I would. Like that's the scene you need for like if you're feeling a little bored, you need like a scene where like, come on guys, let's go. You know.
It's like, we're going down to the pub. We're gonna beat up Clapton.
You know, and
break his hand so he can.
So they come up with this challenge for themselves where it's like, we're going to play them straight through, and that's what's going to be on the album. We're not going to do any overdubs. And then they kind of throw their hands in the air and then make Abbey Road, where it's got all the overdubs, all the like sound effects of crickets and stuff. And, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you put these like handcuffs on yourself and then come in. But like, so they have a couple songs where they want some keyboards on it, and then it's like, okay, well, if John is switching over from his guitar to the keyboard for this song, now we're missing part of our sound. We don't have the guitar, and in the past, what we do is record it with us all like on guitars and whatever, and then we'd overdub the keyboard. So what do we do? And then they're like, oh, maybe we bring in a keyboard player, and then you know, Billy Preston comes in to visit, and then it's like, wait a second, you know,
this guy's amazing.
2 + 2 = 4, and then he's playing, and it's like they're cooking, and then they're like, he's in the band, and then they start, you know, he's a Beatle now, and then they start talking like, maybe the Beatles aren't 4 guys, maybe the Beatles, it's like, you know, us and like the whole, you know, which is kind of the direction rock and roll kind of goes, you know, where you come out with this like big, you know, ensemble,
and folks, you know, can join your
yeah, and like maybe that would have been the way forward for the Beatles, you know.
He's like, Lynn, I'm still laughing. It's like, Lynn is like, all right, I'm going to out to grab some lunch. Does anybody else want to come with me? Anyone? Yeah. I'm leaving. I'd love to buy someone lunch. Like,
you know, and
I have somebody in here that
I could see Yoko like kind of having a point too of like, it's like, hey, there's all these other personnel in here anyway, so what's the big deal if I'm here too, you know? But again, they were kind of like, you know, Paul McCartney and John were creative partners, and then he met Yoko, and now it's the John and Yoko show from like then on. You know?
I'm Paul. I'm like, well, the lighting guys are gonna go home with me. You know, whispering sweet nothings.
It was kind of like tit for tat too, because then it's like, then Paul's like, okay, Linda's in my band now, you know. And then,
yeah, you're right. Oh my God.
I mean, they both kind of like.
You're right. Now that you're mentioning this, they're doing like
dueling banjos.
Dueling banjos. Yeah.
Which again, it's like, well, who's your peer? When you're Paul McCartney, who's your peer? It's John Lennon, and John Lennon, you know, who's your peer? It's Paul McCartney. So like that's who you're kind of looking at. It's like, oh, what's he doing? Maybe I should put my wife in my band.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think like John, like, you know, like Yoko gets a lot of bad press and stuff.
Oh yeah,
you know, she gets a lot of bad press unfairly, I think. John Lennon, like I think John Lennon, you know, like, you know, he never really knew his mom, and then he kind of got to know her a little bit when he was a teenager, and then she died. So it's like Yoko was like a mom, like she was there to be a mom to him, and she had a daughter already, and so she was older. You know, she kind of like, you know, had her shit together, like she, you know, kind of, and like just like I feel like she just kind of took over his life, and was like, and he was like, yes, thank you, please, you know,
because he's
mommy.
I remember you guys were telling about the Ringo interview. Was that the one where he said, "Don't toss it"? Or whatever?
Oh yeah, it's gonna get tossed.
The fan mail.
Yeah, don't send the fan mail. Any letters or pictures you have signed, they're gonna get tossed. they're gonna get tossed.
You guys were telling me about
We
that.
got to skip, and they're gonna get tossed. No fan mail, no pictures to be signed. If it hasn't got this date on it, it's gonna get tossed. It's gonna get tossed into the ocean.
Saying about he said he's gonna...
Peace and love. I say this with peace and love. It's gonna get tossed into the drink. It's gonna get tossed. Be down with the Titanic. If it doesn't have this date on it.
I gotta find that Paul McCartney interview on Stern. He's like, remember when you came...
You wanted some of this, and I told you to get lost. That 2 weeks later, I'm in the studio, and who comes walking in arm in arm with John Lennon?
I remember when fucking Howard Stern called Sean Lennon on the... They were like... Called him. I remember.
Yeah, he called him. Yeah, that was legendary when he called him.
He was
Sean
like
Lennon.
roasting him. He said you weren't like it was like 1 PM. He was just waking.
Hey man, why are you making fun of my mom? Why can't you be nicer to my mom?
I was listening to that in the car. I was fucking pissing my
Oh yeah,
I
remember hearing that. Yeah, I was in like I was taking like a break at my job, and I was at like the the convenience store like around the corner listening to the headphones.
Hey man, that's why are you always talking shit about my mom?
And they're like, you can't use that kind of language on the air.
Oh, I thought you were a rebel or something.
Now I need to. I'm re-listening to it because like I ended up looking up the Jackie.
Yeah, they need to do like a Beatles supercut. Oh yeah, and Jackie.
I quit Stern. And then 2 weeks later, Paul McCartney's on. I've been wanting to talk because I heard Paul McCartney loves dirty jokes. The Paul McCartney loves dirty jokes. I got a dirty joke.
And then he's like,
I was at a party and McCartney was there, and I said, "Hey, you want to hear a dirty joke?" And I told him a joke, and he said,
"That's a good one. That's a good one, Jack. You're the joke man. How would you like to be a Beatle? There's 2 openings."
I looked up the Rodney Dangerfield. He's like,
"Hey Jackie, where's my 1,000?
"Where's my 1,000?"
You asked to borrow $1,000. I gave you $1,000. You came back 2 weeks later, asked me for another 1,000.
You called that square.
"That first that's square."
I was telling my brother about that.
Hey Jackie, it's gonna stop somewhere.
The price list.
Charity begins at home, Jackie.
You call that first that square?
And he's like, jokes. You paid me in jokes. The priceless.
With him talking to Sean, and because like he's
I'm listening to that tonight.
and then like when Paul McCartney was married to Heather Mills, he was on Stern, and he was telling the story about how he asked Linda. He's like, oh, he was considering whether or not to like get married to Heather Mills, and then he asked Linda, and then he heard an owl, hoo, and he took that as like a yes, and then like Stern's like, well, what if that owl was really saying no?
Dude, that's so fucking funny. Oh my god, you're right. A Beatles Stern supercut would be legendary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because at this point they sound like us. There's another great Stern Beatles moment where like Stern was like backstage with Paul, and Chris Rock was there too, and like at this point like Stern's daughter was like an autograph collector or whatever, and she asked, "Oh, Dad, could you please get Paul McCartney's autograph?" And then Stern asked like he had like a piece of paper and a pen, and he's like, "Oh, Paul, could I get an autograph from you?" And Paul was like, in a minute, like, and then Stern like looked at Chris Rock, and Chris Rock is just like shaking his head and laughing because he saw Stern get like handled, kind of like, oh wait, and guess what? He never got that autograph.
Oh my god!
He got like, oh sorry mate, I'll help you in a minute.
He got big time.
He got big time.
Paul McCartney.
And he said he was so.
I might walk into traffic after that.
That's
like
rough.
I would. I don't know how to go on. Like I'd be like, oh my god, no.
Yeah. Yeah, and in his life, you know, he would never ask anybody for anything, but it's like, oh, it's for my daughter, you know, like
I'm Howard Stern.
You know, it's your heartstrings. You know, your kids get your heartstrings and stuff, and then,
he's like, yeah, because
Paul big time.
Oh my god, big time.
I feel like that wouldn't happen now. I feel like now, like they've gotten
closer.
Like Paul had been on the show a couple times when he big timed them. Jackie the joke man's cracking up. Like Jackie's like outside the door, like cracking up.
That's so. It makes legendary that Chris Rock is there.
Yeah,
for him to like
the perfect audience, because it might have like just sailed. Like nobody might have noticed that moment otherwise, but you got like, you know, the funniest guy
in the room there, and he's like shaking his head. He's like, "You blew it,
you Howard Stern."
Man, Paul McCartney.
That needs to show up in Chris Rock's like next act.
Oh yes, this is really like
this.
It's like like a refreshing water.
We're talking about like a 12-hour, you know, TV special. It's like I guess 6 hours or something.
Yeah.
So of course we're gonna have an epic
episode,
and you know what? This is part one. This is part one of the Total Recall Get Back sessions.
Yeah.
I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli, or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli, and check out my Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search Tom Scioli.
Follow me on Instagram at cinema_tomb.
And, you know, we'll see you next time. We'll get back here.
Yeah, to where we once belonged. Should we take the long and winding road?
But we're going to have to go across the universe first.
I hope nothing we don't have to toss it.
It's going to get tossed. This whole episode's going to get tossed. You've said some incendiary things about Yoko. It's going to get tossed.
Howard Stern's like called Sean. He's like, it sounds like it's about one. It's like,
oh yeah, I forgot. We also shit talked Sean Ono Lennon for a minute, and he's very vocal on the social media, and he's like,
"Don't tell me about my dad. Don't quote my dad to me. You think I don't know about my dad? You think you need to quote my dad's famous sayings to me? He's my dad, okay?"
I think me and Sean are like the same age, so
I'm
on very similar paths.
I'm gonna. Stern was roasting on that phone call. He's like, "Sounds like you just got up."
This part's gonna get tossed into the skip. Yeah, it's about time Yoko gets her comeuppance. Yeah, it's like Yoko. I feel bad saying anything bad about Yoko because, you know, one of the most like vilified people. She's been shit on from like day one, and like no, she doesn't deserve it.
I'm actually gonna ask Yoko for a personal, no interest, no refund loan. Actually,
I mean, you can't help but note her presence in this, but yeah, we're Yoko fans.
Yeah, we are.